If you were to trek into the deep, isolated valleys of the Gifu prefecture in Japan during the peak of winter, you would witness a scene that looks less like a landscape and more like a suffocation. This is the Yukiguni, the snow country. Here, the moist air from the Sea of Japan collides with the Japanese Alps, dumping a volume of snow that is almost incomprehensible to the rest of the world. We are not talking about a foot or two. We are talking about 4, 5, sometimes 6 meters of snow in a single season. It buries roads. It snaps telephone poles. It crushes cars as if they were made of tinfoil. In this white silence, the weight of the snow is the ultimate predator. A single cubic meter of settled, wet snow can weigh up to 500 kilograms. A standard roof, the kind you see in Tokyo or Kyoto, would not just leak under this strain, it would disintegrate. The timber would splinter, the tiles would shatter, and the structure would pancake, killing everyone sleeping inside. This valley is a geological trap, a place where gravity and weather conspire to erase human presence. Yet, emerging from the drifts, standing defiant against the white backdrop, are monsters. They are wooden structures so massive, so imposing, that they look like prehistoric beasts hibernating in the frost. These are the Gassho-zukuri houses. Some of them are 4 stories tall. They have survived typhoons, earthquakes, and centuries of crushing snow. But the most terrifying thing about them isn't their size. It is the fact that they are held together without a single iron nail. To survive the most brutal winter on the main island of Japan, these villagers had to reject the strength of iron and embrace the flexibility of grass. They had to build a house that defied the logic of rigidity to pray for survival. To understand the architectural mastery of the Gassho-zukuri, you must first understand the enemy in granular detail. The enemy is wet snow. Unlike the dry, powdery snow of Hokkaido or the Rockies, the snow in this region is heavy, sticky, and dense with water content. When it lands, it bonds. It creates a solid, heavy blanket that clings to surfaces. If you build a roof with a standard pitch, say 30 degrees, this wet snow does not slide off. It accumulates. It freezes, thaws, and refreezes, creating ice dams at the eaves. As the winter progresses, the snow load builds vertically. On a typical footprint of a house, the weight of the snow above it can exceed 100 tons. That is the equivalent of parking a Boeing 757 on your roof. Modern solutions fail here. Concrete is strong, but it is cold and expensive to transport into these remote valleys. Metal roofs shed snow, but in the 17th and 18th centuries, metal was a luxury, and iron conducted the freezing cold straight into the living quarters. The historical scene is the Edo period. These valleys were cut off from the rest of Japan. There were no snowplows. There was no outside help. If your roof collapsed, you died. The villagers were isolated, cultivating a secret economy of gunpowder and silk, hiding in plain sight. They needed a fortress that could double as a factory, built entirely from materials they could harvest within a 1-mile radius of the river. Imagine the first struggles of the settlers in this valley. Before the perfection of the steep praying hands roof, the trial and error must have been terrifying. You can imagine the sound of a standard roof beam groaning in the middle of the night. The wood fibers tearing slowly under the silent, crushing weight of the snow. The sensory experience of a collapse is not loud, it is muffled. The snow dampens the sound. One moment, you are sleeping near the hearth. The next, the ceiling meets the floor. The heavy, wet snow packs instantly like concrete. You cannot dig your way out. The suffocation is slow. They likely tried propping up their roofs with extra internal pillars, turning the living space into a forest of columns. But this made the space unusable. They tried clearing the snow by hand, a dangerous, back-breaking daily labor that burned calories they couldn't spare. They realized that fighting the weight of the snow was a losing battle. You cannot hold up the sky. They needed to stop fighting gravity and start using it. They needed a shape that made it mathematically impossible for the snow to stay. The turning point, the engineering epiphany, came from a radical rethinking of geometry. The builders realized that the angle of repose for wet snow was high. To make it slide, the roof couldn't just be steep, it had to be radical. They pushed the pitch of the roof to 60 degrees. This forms an equilateral triangle, the strongest shape in geometry. The aha moment was the realization that by creating this massive, steep attic space, they weren't just shedding snow, they were creating a microclimate. The steep angle meant the snow would avalanche off the sides naturally, piling up around the house to create an igloo effect, insulating the lower floors, while the roof itself remained clear. But the geometry was only half the solution. The real genius lay in the joinery. They knew that iron nails rust, but more importantly, iron nails are rigid. In the winter, wood shrinks. In the summer, it expands. In a storm, it vibrates. A rigid nail in a moving piece of wood will work itself loose over time. The hole widens, the joint fails, the roof collapses. To solve this, they turned to the forests. They found mansaku, witch hazel, and nesso, young saplings of cedar or twisted vines. They realized that if they twisted these green saplings while they were wet, they became like wire. Strong but elastic. They developed a technique of lashing the timbers together with rope and vines, creating a pin joint structure. This meant the house wasn't a rigid box, it was a flexible basket. But discovering the material was the easy part. Using it would create a construction process so dangerous and demanding that it required the soul of the entire village to complete. The deep dive into the construction of a Gassho-zukuri begins with the selection of the chonaba, the great pillars. These are massive beams of Japanese cedar. The tactile sensation of working this wood is visceral. It smells of resin and earth. The carpenters would use adzes to hand-finish the beams, leaving a textured surface that allowed the lashings to grip. The primary structure is unlike any other Japanese home. In a standard house, the roof rests on vertical posts that go all the way up. In a Gassho style, the huge A-frame roof sits on top of the box-like lower structure, almost independent of it. It is held in place by its own weight and the complex web of beam crossings. The tying of the knots is a sacred engineering task. The ropes, often handmade from straw or bark, are soaked in water to make them pliable. The builders wrap them around the intersection of the beams with immense force. As the rope dries, it shrinks. It constricts the wood, creating a joint that is tighter than any bolt. But because it is organic, it has give. When the wind hits the massive surface area of the roof, the ropes stretch microscopically and then snap back. You can hear the house groaning in a storm. It sounds like a living thing. It is communicating the stress, redistributing it through thousands of knots. But then the crisis hits. The structure is built, but the roof is naked. The skeleton stands against the sky. The autumn rains are coming, followed by the snow. You have to thatch a roof that is nearly 400 square meters in surface area, and you have to do it on a 60-degree slope. This is where the concept of yui comes in. No single family can build a Gassho house. It requires the labor of 200 people. The crisis is logistical. If the thatch is not laid perfectly before the first freeze, the water will penetrate. If water gets into the straw bundles, it will rot the thatch from the inside out. The wind begins to pick up, blowing down the valley. The men are up on the scaffolding, suspended by ropes, holding bundles of Suzuki, pampas grass that weigh 10 kilograms each. The slope is terrifyingly steep. A slip means death. The rhythm of the work changes. It becomes frantic. They are racing the season. But here is the paradox. The stronger the wind blew, the better the roof performed. This seems impossible. A high wind usually strips thatch, but the Gassho builders oriented the houses very specifically. They lined them up parallel to the prevailing wind direction, north-south. This orientation did two things. First, it minimized the surface area hitting the wind, reducing the drag. Second, and more brilliantly, it controlled the sun. By facing the long sides of the roof east and west, one side catches the morning sun and the other catches the afternoon sun. This maximizes the solar melting of the snow. The wind, channeled along the valley, would strip the snow off the ridgeline, keeping the top-heavy beam clear while the sun did the rest. The wind was not an enemy to be blocked, it was a broom to be guided. The refinement of the design continues with the thatch itself. This is not just throwing grass on a roof, it is a multi-layered insulation system. The bottom layer is made of hemp or reed, destined to be seen from the inside. The outer layer is the Suzuki grass. The genius lies in the breathability of the thatch. The house was a factory. The villagers raised silkworms in the attic. Silkworms are incredibly sensitive creatures. They need warmth, but they generate moisture. If the humidity gets too high, the worms die. If it gets too cold, they die. The heat from the irori, the central fire pit on the ground floor, would rise up through the slatted floors. The smoke would filter through the levels, warming the silkworms. Then, the smoke would slowly percolate through the meter-thick thatch roof. This interaction is chemical. The smoke contains creosote and soot. As it passes through the grass and the rope lashings, it fumigates them. It kills the bugs that eat the straw. It waterproofs the rope, it hardens the wood. The house was designed to be smoked. The more they burned the fire to stay warm, the stronger the roof became. It was a symbiotic cycle between the human need for heat and the structural need for preservation. The test of survival arrives in late January. The Sanpachi Gusetsu, the heavy snow event, hits. For 3 days, the snow falls at a rate of 10 centimeters per hour. The world disappears. The silence returns. Outside, the snow is piling up. It reaches the first floor windows, then the second. The pressure is immense. But look at the roof. The snow accumulates to about a meter, and then gravity takes over. With a sound like a thunderclap, a dodon, tons of snow shear off the steep, slick grass and crash to the ground. The roof clears itself. Inside, the sensory experience is womb-like. The storm is raging, but the temperature is stable. The massive attic, filled with the smell of mulberry leaves and the soft rustle of silkworms, acts as a thermal buffer. The thick thatch traps the air, providing insulation value equivalent to modern fiberglass. The family sits around the irori, drinking tea. The house creaks occasionally, a dull thud of a rope tightening, a beam settling. But it holds. The pin joints are flexing, dancing with the weight, distributing the load down the massive cedar pillars into the stone foundation. The result of this adaptation was not just survival, it was prosperity. Because they had these massive, warm attics, the villages of Shirakawa-go and Gokayama became the leading producers of high-quality silk and nitre for gunpowder in the region. The house paid for itself. The data is staggering. A well-built gassho roof can last for 30 to 40 years before needing replacement. The load capacity is virtually unlimited because it sheds the load before it becomes critical. Modern engineers have studied these structures and found that they are practically earthquake-proof. When the ground shakes, the house jumps. The unnailed structure allows it to shift on its stone base and settle back down, whereas a rigid concrete foundation would crack. The Gassho-zukuri is a masterclass in community and geometry. It reminds us that technology is not always about new materials. Sometimes it is about a new understanding of old materials. These farmers didn't have carbon fiber, they had grass. They didn't have steel, they had twigs. Yet they built structures that have outlasted empires. But the deepest lesson is about the yui. The roof is biodegradable. It rots. It demands to be replaced. This forced the village to stay together. You could not be a hermit in Shirakawa-go. If you didn't help your neighbor rethatch their roof, they wouldn't help you. The architecture mandated cooperation. The house was not just a shelter for the body, it was a binding agent for the society. We live in a world of forever materials, plastic, concrete, steel, that allow us to live in isolation, disconnected from our neighbors and our environment. The Gassho-zukuri stands as a reminder that there is strength in impermanence and there is safety in the collective. They built mountains out of grass to survive the mountains of snow. If you want to discover more forgotten ancient technologies that helped humanity survive, subscribe now and comment below. What type of ancient shelter should we explore next?